Lions and tigers and mythological crocodile alligator hybrids, oh my. You are listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and this week on the podcast, we are talking about perhaps the most anticipated roller coaster of 2022. Yes, if you're listening to this podcast, you're as excited as we are for Daddy Pig's roller coaster down in Peppa Pig theme park. Wait, no, sorry. Go further down I-4. I don't even think Legoland's on I-4. But we had Shane Joseph and Mike Martin, who couldn't join us today, down at the media day last week for Iron Gwazi, the brand new RMC hybrid, the rebirth of the original Gwazi, which was a GCI racing wooden coaster. But without further ado, let's welcome in Shane Joseph, the man, the myth, the legend, who's actually gotten to experience Iron Gwazi in person. Shane, how are you?
I'm good, Andrew. Thanks for asking. I am very good.
That is wonderful. I am glad that we've been able to get you on the podcast. I know this past week we had Rob McNicholas from SeaWorld Orlando, the Vice President of Operations, to talk Icebreaker, but that's not the only shiny new toy in the Busch SeaWorld portfolio this year. Obviously, there's Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg and Emperor at SeaWorld San Diego, and Texas Stingray still kind of shiny and new, and Icebreaker, but you got to ride Iron Gwazi last week when we went down for Media Day. So I'm going to let you take it away. I mean, let's hear it first. Like, what were your overall impressions of Iron Gwazi?
So overall, I was very, very impressed. Before my visit, I had never been on an RMC of this size before. And I think that even if you have, a lot of the elements that are on this ride are very new for RMC, and they're going to be very new experience for a lot of people that are riding it, even enthusiasts. So really, I wasn't sure what to expect going in beforehand. And then while I was on the ride, I was very pleasantly surprised by pretty much everything that the ride threw at me, between the smoothness of the layout to the actual elements themselves and how they work with each other and with the layout as a whole and with the environment of the park. Pretty much every step of the way I was impressed.
I love it. And let's start right at the beginning. I mean, last time I was at Busch Gardens Tampa was fall of 2019. Iron Gwazi had been announced. We all know how 2020 and 2021 went, but when I last saw it, it was the lift hill was being assembled. There were pieces of track that, weren't completed, and you could get certain angles, but how is this visually? How does it compare to anything in the park, and how does it kind of alter the park skyline?
Oh, I mean, the skyline is completely changed. Even driving up to the park, you can see Iron Gwazi from like many blocks away. It is very visually impressive, and no matter where you're standing in the park, this massive lift hill is just looming over everything. It is really impressive how much this ride stands out. Even as I was on the plane landing in Tampa, you can see this lift hill from the airport as you're coming into Tampa. So I was excited, and my anticipation was building literally from the minute I touched down in Tampa, because this structure is huge.
Yeah, I imagine it's a lot like when you're headed towards Carowinds, and I mean, you can see Fury from the airport depending on which way you land and take off. But I liken it. I get off of Interstate 485 and I get onto I-77, which is the road Carowinds is located on. I know this is like hyper niche local content, so if you're from the Charlotte area, you know what I'm talking about. But as you approach Carowinds, you hit this turn and you can see Fury, and you're ready. You're just ready to take it on. But all right, let's talk that first ride. You and Mike from our team, you guys again there for Media Day. Your first ride was in the first row, which, as first rides go, it was pretty good. And we've got a POV, reverse POV, multi-camera POV even on our YouTube channel of Shane and Mike's first ride. But Shane, take us through the coaster start to finish. I mean, talk about these elements. I've heard the death roll mentioned on social media, but I'm trying to stay as spoiler free as possible on this one. So you got to talk me through it here.
Okay. So, yeah, like you said, our first ride was in the front, and it was also pretty early in the morning. The park was not open for the day yet. So it was actually fairly cold for Tampa. I think it was around 40, 45 degrees when I woke up that morning. So,
Says the guy who showed up in shorts and and a polo shirt to ride
yes,
this.
well, it goes to show you I was expecting warmer weather than what it was. So I was very cold. But besides that fact, I wasn't sure how the ride would be running because those are not really optimal conditions for a coaster to be running. So I was a little nervous about that. But that really was not an issue at all. I mean, as the day went on, it definitely got faster. But for that first ride, definitely no disappointment. I mean, when you're sitting in that very first row, especially because we had almost like an extra sense of anticipation because we had to like get mic'd up and they had to like slate us in position with the cameras. So that was just so much fun. And then when you're ascending that beautiful purple lift hill and you can just see how huge this is. I mean, I've been on many coasters that are as tall and taller than Iron Gwazi, but I don't know, something about the flat landscape all around, even when you're on the lift hill, it just keeps going. And something that not a lot of people are really talking about is, and I've never seen this from any other RMC, but pretty much when the first car is about to go over the lift, the train noticeably slows down and almost feels like you're going to roll back, and that happens every time. A couple people actually were talking about it at the media day, how that kind of surprised them. They were not expecting it at all. So even before you go down the drop, there's almost a moment where your stomach kind of falls already. And then in that front row, when you're staring down that 91 degree beyond vertical, steepest hybrid drop in the world, that is pretty frightening because you can't see the track since it's going beyond vertical. So it looks like you're about to just fall straight down. And in fact, further than straight down, because as you're going down that 91 degree drop, it is an extremely thrilling experience.
Yeah. Side note: if anybody from marketing from Busch Gardens is listening to this podcast, can you listen and appreciate how Shane just sold that drop? The world's steepest hybrid drop, 91 degrees. You're 206 feet in the air. After that drop, what happens?
So for me personally, I lose vision for about 1 second because every time that I rode Iron Gwazi, no matter which seat, no matter what time of day, I grayed out at the very bottom of that drop because that is extremely intense. So right after that, you ascend the enormous outer banked airtime hill. And, you know, if you've seen or ridden Steel Vengeance, you're familiar sort of with what this element would look like and feel like. I have not experienced Steel Vengeance, so I had no clue what was about to happen. And it's a crazy experience, really. You know, this is one of the many moments where you really feel like this ride is trying to throw you out of your seat because you're going over this hill at an outer bank. So it's essentially hanging you over the side of this hill before bringing you back around. So it's a great follow up element to that drop because you're literally at the ground level. That's how they got it to that height, is they had to actually put it on the ground. And if you're standing near that area, you can see that it is, you know, literally touching the dirt down there. So coming out of that and then going up into that outer banked hill is a really wild experience.
And so you and I were talking about this a little bit offline, kind of before we started. Busch Gardens list Iron Gwazi as having 3 inversions, and RCDB, the be all end all source here, is listing it as 2 inversions. Is this outward bank turn? Is this what you think Busch Gardens is considering, kind of that 3rd inversion?
No, not this one. I think they're considering actually the overbank turn, which comes a little bit later. I think at that angle, it's technically called a cutback because that element is also on the Gerstlauer at one of my home parks at Canopy Lake Park. And they also consider that an inversion, even though you're not technically upside down at any point. I would love to know the degrees on that because you're getting pretty close, but that comes a little bit later in the ride.
Okay. We're getting diving deep into the peak nerddom. What's a credit?
Yeah, really.
What's an inversion? We're all having fun. But of the inversions that are, true inversions, let's talk about those. The one video I kind of saw, and again, trying to stay as spoiler free as possible, but there looked to be a stall on this ride where you had some sustained upside down time.
Yes. So this was another thing that I rode the ride 10 times in total. And I really couldn't remember where the stall was in the layout during any of the rides. And it might just be me or it might just be the nature of the ride. But each time I rode, that thing completely came out of nowhere. And you can't even really see it coming, even in the front row, because everything before that is very twisted and within the structures. So it's really kind of a surprising element. And I wouldn't say it's as sustained as some other stalls, but that's almost to its advantage because you get whipped into it and then pulled down it. So I would almost say that this stall is not as much about the hang time and more about the whippiness of going in and out of it.
Whippiness, is that a scientific term?
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. I love it. I'm hoping we can get Alan Shoki or somebody from RMC on the podcast one day to talk about the whippiness of these
Yeah.
rides
Yeah.
for sure. Well, you mentioned you rode it 10 times. Let's talk seat placement here. Obviously, any good roller coaster ride, it's, you can have a different experience in the front or the back. Where was the best seat that you rode on? Was it the left side? Was it the right side? How are the ride experiences different among the different seats?
So I would say the best ride experience is back car on the right side. Um, and I say that because I really could not find that much of a distinction between the very back row and then the second to back row because they're both in the same car. And actually, a lot of people think that that second to back row on most RMCs is the best. I can't really speak for that, but at least with this ride, I think both of those back rows are really a similar experience and a very, very airtime filled experience. I think Mike, I got to find the exact thing Mike said, but it was along the lines of, let your family ride in the front and save the back for us experts because this is a completely different ride experience than I have ever experienced myself in that very back row because first of all, the way you're getting whipped over that front, the first drop is unbelievable because the entire weight of that train in front of you is pulling down. And it's the same thing on the Outer Banked Hill. It's the same thing on the stall. And it's especially the same thing on the death roll because the reason I think sitting on the right side is the best is because this death roll actually does something a little bit different. It's not just a barrel roll drop like on some of the other RMCs. With this element, you actually go to the right a little bit first, bank that way, and then it whips you to the left through the death roll. So I think if you're on the right side, you're going to get the most of that snappiness back and forth. So I think that for me, that was the standout seat.
Perfect. And just so we're clear, we're calling it a death roll. That's what a lot of enthusiasts have called it. I believe the actual term here is a barrel roll down drop.
Yes.
Death roll sounds a lot more fun.
Yeah, the park I think calls it a 540-degree roll, but in the queue there's actually a sign. There's a bunch of alligator and crocodile facts in the queue, and one of those signs is that when the reptile goes to actually kill their prey, they do a maneuver called a death roll, where they sort of flip over, much like this element. So I think that's where the name came from, and I think that that's great.
I love it. That is wonderful. You touched a little bit on the theming. Like I know Iron Gwazi, originally when it opened in the '90s, it was Gwazi was this lion tiger made up hybrid character that Busch Gardens, I think, created some made up Swahili African type language to denote what Gwazi was. And now that the story is out the window, we've got the gator themed trains, gator, crocodile, whatever the reptile animal is.
Yep.
But how was the rest of the theming kind of around the area? I know Busch Gardens has some crocodile exhibits. I don't believe they moved them to the Iron Gwazi area like in the queue or anything. But how was the
Yeah,
theming
no.
overall?
It's pretty good. I would say, don't expect to be blown away by the theming. Don't expect to be, completely immersed by the theming. But the overall vibe of the area, I think they captured really well. There's a lot of greens and purples, that's for sure. Um, and the queue looks very nice. Obviously, freshly painted, so it really stands out. And then they've got those almost hut-like things that you can see around the entrance, and you walk through a few of those. There's some wood fencing, and there's actually an original soundtrack for the ride as well. I believe the park started doing this with Tigris, which has its own original soundtrack. And that carried over here to Gwazi. And especially in the station, I didn't get to see it at night, but I've seen since then that there's a couple special lighting features and even some like projection looking things that they put on the ceiling of the station. And it's just really impressive. And the color scheme definitely stands out.
Got it. I love it. I'm now thinking back to when I was there in 2019 and I interviewed Andrew Schaefer, he was the project manager and director of design engineering at Busch Gardens Tampa. And he was talking about how they were looking for this coaster when they were originally working with RMC. They were looking for something that was the biggest, baddest, and quote, world's whatever. Presumably the record breaking EST type coasters.
Right.
Do you think, and I ask this knowing that you haven't ridden a ton of other RMCs, but do you think that they accomplished their goal trying to have this world's greatest, fastest, tallest, longest, world's whatever coaster, if not RMC, if not coaster?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, they definitely achieved it. I mean, they can't compete with other coasters in terms of length, unfortunately, and I think that's just because of the space that they were working it with. But other than that, I think that there's, some of those rides where, if you know people that aren't enthusiasts, there are some rides that they know. Things like King Ka or some of the rides at Magic Mountain, stuff like that. I think this is going to become one of those rides that everyone is going to know. And I think that part of that is because of the records. And we're at the point now where parks are beating other parks by, a couple feet or a couple degrees or whatever it is. And I think that that's good from kind of a marketing standpoint, but the real test is, does it feel like that? And does the ride actually benefit from that? And I think in this case, it absolutely does. This ride looks and feels massive.
How does it compare, in your opinion? Obviously, it's one of probably your favorite at Busch Gardens Tampa, but how do you think it completes or complements their overall coaster lineup?
I think that at this point, they have one of the most well-rounded lineups of any park. I would say it's kind of similar to what Hershey Park has, where there really is a ride for everybody at this park. And this ride kind of filled the airtime gap that the park had for a while. And I think it fills it really well. It fills the hyper coaster gap, which I know Sheikra is technically a hyper coaster, being a dive coaster, but not in the traditional sense. So I think that having a 200 plus foot tall traditional lift hill goes a long way, and I think that this ride fits in really well with the lineup, and there's nothing like it currently in Florida as well. This is the first RMC in Florida. And I'm hoping that it won't be the last, but for now, it definitely stands out.
I love it. And I mean, you made the Florida comparison. I know Velocicoaster is one of your favorites. I'm not going to ask you to pick a favorite.
Okay.
But if, let's see, how do I want to word this question? Again, it's like comparing apples to oranges. Velocicoaster, obviously, an intimate,
they really are different. Yeah, they're completely different.
Which would you rather ride? I'm going to make you pick a favorite.
So for me personally, I would rather ride Velocicoaster because the type of ride that I enjoy is a very fast-paced, intense. I'll use the term whippy again, and I think that for me, Velocicoaster does that a little bit better. But like you were saying, it's apples and oranges. These two coasters really are not trying to do any one of the same thing. Aside from maybe the speed, and they're both incredibly fast. So there's really not much of a difference there. But I think that this ride kind of fills in something different in a lot of people's coaster count. I think it's a very different type of RMC. You really feel the speed on this one. I've been on, I think, 3 other RMCs. 2 of them are Twisted Timbers and Wicked Cyclone, 2 kind of smaller, more enclosed kind of layouts.
Mm-hmm.
And this is totally different from those. You really feel the size of these elements. And something that Mike said that I completely agree with is this ride sets up the elements very well. You know pretty much what's about to happen, and you can see as you're riding how this ride is actually designed to so smoothly lead from one part of the ride into the next. Even though there's a lot of elements that are really different from each other, they somehow just come together really well within this layout. And I think that that is a huge achievement.
I love it. Again, Busch Gardens marketing people, if you're listening, Shane is going to need a job at some point. So
that's true. So
we'll link his LinkedIn in the show notes.
Yeah. But
Shane, and I know, you and I are sitting here on Zencastr and we're recording. Podcasts are an auditory medium. But one thing I love about you when you talk about a new roller coaster on this podcast, you wear the shirt. You have
I do.
You have your Iron Gwazi shirt. Let's talk the merch. I saw some of the posts from Media Day, and I think pretty unique to an RMC conversion is the park not only had merch for the new Iron Gwazi, they put out some retro-inspired neon 90s in-your-face, like original Gwazi logos. But what was kind of some of the other merch highlights?
So yeah, there is some really great merch for this ride. A lot of great magnets and pins if you're into that sort of thing. They've got the nano coasters as well from Coaster Dynamics. They have the wooden models of the trains, and they, like you said, they had the vintage Gwazi. They had some hats, shirts, and I think water bottles too. And then, of course, the coveted Iron Gwazi Squishmallows as well. They had those in abundance when I was there. So I think that there's definitely some really great merch for this ride. And the ride has a great logo, too. A lot of new coasters, I think, are really stepping it up with the logos recently. And Iron Gwazi is a great example of that. I feel like a lot of times with park merch, I tend not to buy it as much because specifically coaster related t-shirts don't have the best track record in the looks department. It's usually filled with a lot of stats and visuals that don't actually represent what the ride is. But that's definitely not the case with Iron Gwazi. There is some really great merch available here.
I noticed you didn't send me a text saying, "Hey, can I pick you up something?" But I'm going to let that one slide for sure.
No, I'm sorry. No,
that's okay. How many of the Squishmallows did you buy? No, I'm kidding.
I didn't get any. I'm not really into the Squishmallows. Okay. I feel like I would leave that for everybody else. But kind of the test for me when I go to a park is, will I like the ride enough to actually buy a shirt. And in this case, I definitely did. So it passed the test in that regard.
Yes. And real quick, I know we're talking Iron Gwazi, but did you happen to catch the shirt that SeaWorld came out with earlier today that's like a Vanilla Ice icebreaker like collaboration shirt?
No, I didn't, but that sounds awesome, and I
I'm
want to look at it.
I'm gonna send you this link right now in the chat while we're talking.
Please
But
do,
I
because
think
I really need to see this.
I think Vanilla Ice is playing at SeaWorld's their food festival that's going on right now, and I think he's performing, and I just
I think you're right. I think I did see that.
Vanilla Ice icebreaker. It's all good. How do let's see. Put this in the chat. There it is. You got to take a look at this. I need your reaction live on audio.
All right, here we go. Ready? I'm about to click it. We got the link up right here.
Again, this is an auditory medium.
Oh, wow. Folk. I mean, these are, I mean, if you want to talk retro, these really are going to stand out.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're looking for a shirt that's going to get you some head turns whenever you walk into a room, this is a great example of that.
So I gotta figure out somebody at SeaWorld if they can find me a 2X in this Vanilla Ice shirt. I will Venmo them immediately. We'll make this happen.
And it also says in the tweet here that on Saturday, starting at 10 a.m., the first 75 guests are going to get their shirts signed by Vanilla Ice himself. So this podcast is going to come out after that. But if you did manage to get your shirt signed, please send us a message on social media.
Yeah, drop us a tweet at Coaster101, Facebook, Instagram. We want to see your signed Vanilla Ice shirt so we can respond with a GIF from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of Vanilla Ice singing "Go Ninja, Go Ninja, Go." Anyway, back to Iron Gwazi. You know, I know you were down there. You flew down from New England. And you mentioned you had 10 rides on Iron Gwazi, but you spent some more time at the park. What else were the highlights of your visit down to Florida?
Well, I actually got 2 new credits on this trip because when I went in early 2019, Tigris was not open yet. So I got to ride the Skyrocket 2 Tigris at the park, and I really liked it. The only other one I've been on is also orange. Funnily enough, it is Phobia at Lake Compounce. And there's a couple differences. Phobia does not have the comfort collars. It just has a lap bar. And Phobia has 2 cars instead of 3, which I didn't realize before going in. But sitting in the back row of that 3rd car and getting whipped over that final drop is really great.
Yeah. Those Premier Skyrocket coasters. They're a ton of fun, and
they really are. And those are a ride that I don't mind that it's being put everywhere because I'm going to ride it at whatever park it's at.
Right, exactly. And people say they have negative things to say about comfort collars. I personally don't mind them.
I don't care. They didn't even touch me the whole time. Like they are so the only time that I didn't like them is when you're getting in and out of the train. They're a little tough to maneuver around when you're sitting down. But during the ride, yeah, they're fine. I had no problem with them.
Yeah, I'd rather take that over a B&M stand-up OTSR.
Oh, definitely.
I'm just as my ears are just banging back and forth.
Yeah.
So give me a comfort collar any day of the week.
Definitely.
But let's get your final thoughts on Iron Gwazi and last attempt for the Busch Gardens marketing and sales department to find this podcast and eventually offer you a job. Why should enthusiasts, non-enthusiasts alike get down to Busch Gardens Tampa this year or as soon as possible to ride Iron Gwazi?
Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about my favorite element on the ride because we've not talked about it yet.
My bad.
And no, it's okay because it's kind of an unorthodox favorite element. But having talked to a lot of people on Media Day, this is not an uncommon opinion. And that element is the first wave turn over the station. I have never experienced a wave turn like this. It takes what I love about that very first moment of West Coast racers kind of being thrown into that high five element. And this ride just takes that to the next level. You're getting snapped in and out of that. And it seems like you're just hanging sideways forever. The lateral airtime is crazy, and it's so picturesque as well. You can see it when you're standing in front of the ride. It goes right over the front entrance and front sign. So I think that it's just one of the things that this ride does so well. So if you are an enthusiast looking for a brand new coaster experience, even if you've been on all the RMCs out there, or if you haven't been on a lot of RMCs and want to make this your first experience, there is a lot that stands out about Iron Gwazi, and it is definitely one of the best coasters to have opened in recent memory. So yeah, I would make it a priority to get down to Busch Gardens Tampa and ride Iron Gwazi.
There we go. It opens to the public, I believe, March 11th. I think they're doing Passholder previews. Those should still be going on while this podcast comes out. So if you're a Busch Gardens season pass holder, season pass member, whatever their preferred nomenclature is for the people who can go to the park pretty much whenever they want, look at your pass holder portal and find it, and you can get in some early rides before it opens to the general public on March 11th. Check out buschgardens.com, at Busch Gardens on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We'll link all these in the show notes, but that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. After you visit Busch Gardens' website, be sure to check out our website, coaster101.com. Shane and Mike both put together a really comprehensive review. This is kind of the audio version of that, so if you're an auditory person as opposed to a visual learner, we appreciate you listening to the podcast, but be sure to go check out the videos and article as well on coaster101.com. We're at Coaster101 anywhere you can find social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, TikTok.
Yeah, we got some great YouTube videos from Gwazi. We got a front row POV, back row POV, and an off-ride POV. So definitely go check those out. We're getting some great comments on those videos. So definitely head over.
I love it. And yeah, Mike had his GoPro on his wrist, and so you guys had like a reverse POV that you put together with the official POV, and it's kind of like a side by side of everything. So yeah, head over to our YouTube channel, check that out. If you're listening to this podcast, like, rate, review, subscribe. 5-star reviews on iTunes and Spotify now allows you to review. And we're going to pick a winner. We're going to pick somebody who reviews this podcast specifically in the next 2 weeks. So we'll give you until the end of February. If you review our podcast or have reviewed our podcast already, we've got a little bit of Iron Gwazi merch, and we will send it your way. We're going to pick a review at random. So if you're listening, head over to iTunes, leave a review, and there's a chance you might get some Iron Gwazi swag. So be sure to do that. But thanks, as always, to Justin Mabry of JM Music Design for our theme music. I know they've got some great shows coming up this spring at My Home Park and Carowinds that I'm really excited about. But yeah, that's going to do it for this week, and we will talk to y'all again soon. Thanks, Shane.
You're welcome. See you later, everybody.
See ya.